So basically, say what you think is interesting for yourself, pursue novelty, and if it interests you, it'll interest a significant portion of the audience. So this kind of
No,
notion.
forget the audience. No,
Or
forget
it
the
won't.
audience. Don't pay any attention to the audience. Don't pay
Right,
any
right,
attention to
right.
followers. If you're speaking for the audience is worthless. If you're writing for followers, your followers are worthless. This is
Think
just
about
about
any
you.
other sport. Like, think about a sport. Do they play for their audience? No. They
Not
play to
the
win.
audience.
That is literally the
Exactly.
only reason that they're on the field, is to win. And so, like, if you want these people to play the best, you put them in a bubble with no audience.
So most of us here in this audience have listened to your podcast, and it's been wildly successful. What do you think drives the success of the podcast?
I think the podcast is successful because I knew I had a guaranteed audience of one, and that means I was scratching my own itch. In the case of whenever I try to design something for a market, it fails. Whenever I just do something that I couldn't find for myself, then it does fine. Seems to be the trend. So I'm scratching my own itch. If you have a guaranteed market of one, i.e. yourself, like you're ahead of 99% of the entrepreneurs out there.
Great.
Yeah,
I like
playing
that.
for the audience is also inauthentic. And people, even though the people will deep down detect that. Someone who's playing to the audience will eventually be boring to the audience.
Yeah, I really enjoy that. I really like that framework. That resonates. Part of it also, I think, is just the authenticity of having a conversation with a buddy, like you guys are referring to. The more you can
It's also about risk, I think. Like, it's risky to talk about the things that are in your head and you haven't talked about them before, you haven't performed them hundreds and hundreds of times. Like when you're reading a script, and there's obviously, this is a spectrum, so you can have things that you've never talked about. You have you have your bits that you go to. I think it's actually very similar to sort of stand-up comedy. But I think it's about the risk. It's about the fact this is why live performance is interesting, even though you can go listen to an album and it's higher quality. You don't have to go to a music festival. Is because you're like, it's the risk involved, and
it's risky,
and it's the scarcity there.
Yeah, it's hard to be interesting for long periods of time. Most people cannot speak extemporaneously on many topics and synthesize them on the fly, as Robbie was saying and Julian was saying. These are difficult talents. So what ends up happening is most people, when they have to go live, they end up resorting to talking about politics, news, weather, sports, because these are things that are also live. So there's always you can always say the old things again in a new way about new data. So talk radio tends to degenerate into those categories. But now if you get out of those categories, what remains? If you want someone to just talk extemporaneously live, there are very, very few people who can do that for long periods of time and stay interesting, right? Most of the few remaining ones you'll find are in comedy, and even those are heavily rehearsed, right? A good comedian rehearses their jokes over and over. But a good comedian is a good speaker. They're witty. What are they doing? They're telling the truth, the uncomfortable truth, in a way that they can get away with it, right? They're showing how to be brave in front of an audience and not get, hit by the mob. It's a classic role of the jester. And so, it's hard to be interesting for long periods of time, and most people can't do it. So you end up with professional comedians being the very small class that can do it. Now, so if you look at talk radio, there's a Howard Sterns of the world, which are basically comedians. And Joe Rogan, right? There's the news people of the world, very often in extreme politics, right? So they always something new to talk about. Rush Limbaugh, who just recently passed away, was one of these characters. Or you have sportscasters. But outside of that, talk radio is really tough. So how's Clubhouse trying to tackle that? Well, one thing Clubhouse does is it throws multiple people in a room, right? Second is it's unscheduled. Like, I don't have a Naval show. I don't have to show up at a specific time and always perform. I can leave when I'm bored, or I can turn over the heavy lifting to Sahil or to somebody else. Sahil actually called me into this room, which is why I'm here. And so there are ways to kind of mitigate the issue.
Status game. That was a status game right there.
It was.
Sahil was getting winded. He was exhausted.
This format is hilarious because the moment I come in, my followers get notified. Then my followers show up. Some of them stick to you. So of course you want me in your room because I suck in a whole host of followers, right? That you then leech off of. So what have you done for me lately, Sahil?
I'm working on Angelus Rolling Funds, everybody.
But I show up because Sahil is interesting to talk to, right? He's one of the few people that I can riff with for long periods of time, and he'll say something interesting. I might learn something that I get a kick out of. So here I am. It's a bait, right? You set the bait. Here I am. But even Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is a stand-up comedian. He's a really funny guy. He's a really interesting guy. He's got lots of opinions and everything. But even Joe doesn't make the Joe Rogan podcast about Joe Rogan. He's interviewing people. because at some point you just run out of things to talk about. So you need somebody else to riff with. And so I just think the Clubhouse phenomenon is going to be interesting. Now, there are a few people in human history who can just talk and talk and talk on their own about whatever their favorite topic is, and they will inspire lots of people. There aren't many of those people, but those are the people that create movements, right? Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Hitler. These are people who are Trump. Yeah, these are people who can riff extemporaneously for long periods of time, and their audience, who is aligned with them, will forgive the foibles, understand the broader message, and then get really, really unified behind this person. So I think those kinds of leaders, for better or for worse, will emerge in Clubhouse and sort of be the dominant personalities over time. They will literally have individual cults of personality.
Yeah, if you thought Donald Trump was scary on Twitter, imagine Clubhouse.
I'm interested in what makes something interesting. I think part of it is novelty, like Naval was mentioning earlier. So if you break down novelty, it seems to be a few things. One is, did you say something counter narrative? So something against what people are told is how the world works. Or maybe it was something counterintuitive. Something to the effect of like, oh shit, I had no idea that's how the world works. I didn't realize that intuitively. Or is it shock and awe? Or is it a really elegant synthesis, maybe? So
I think it's all of those things are the same thing, which is this truth. It's telling the truth, either a truth that people didn't already know, or it's a truth they knew but couldn't articulate the right way, or it's a truth that they did know, could articulate, but were too afraid to say. It's all about truth. It is very difficult to speak truth in front of a large group of people, and it takes a lot of verbal skill and a lot of synthesis to do it. And yes, you can teach them something new, but eventually you'll run out of new things. So then a lot of it becomes about articulating old things in new ways. Like, what is wisdom, right? Wisdom cannot be communicated. It's something that has to be learned on your own, has to be experienced, and you have to synthesize it for yourself. Knowledge, we can collectively build knowledge. If you figure out how to build an airplane, then I can take your schematics and build the next airplane and improve upon it. But if I figure out, how to have a good love life, and that comes after lots of bad relationships, I can't pass that on to you. You have to figure that out for yourself. So wisdom has to be rediscovered by people one at a time. That said, what I can do is I can remind you of things that you already know. And the best way to do that is to get past cliches, because cliches are things you've heard too often. And I can re-articulate something that I've learned in a new way, so it strikes at the core of yourself and reminds you that, aha, yes, I should keep that in mind. Thank you for re-articulating that for me. And so that is something you can get rewarded for, which is communicating truths, but these are truths that have to be learned individually, and you can only be reminded of, but can be re-articulated. So all of the 3 points you made, I think, fall under the category of truth.
Yeah, that resonates. So something like truth plus authenticity and not giving a fuck about the audience. There's something there. And there's one more component.
Well, they all go together. If you give
well,
a fuck
truth
about the audience,
is the ultimate.
Truth. Yeah, if you care what the audience thinks, then you're pandering to them, which means you're saying things you don't necessarily believe to get a certain reaction of the audience, and that's falsehood. That's
yeah.
lying.
So my Twitter account, like, the reason it works is because I post the Gumroad financials every month. All the other tweets are fine and fun, but I think the reason that I have real skin in the game, because that's the only thing that matters. That's the thing that people judge me for. Am I running a successful business or not? Like, that would change everything about me. For the reason, I'm not, my identity, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. But for other people and for the status game, that's the thing that really matters. And I think it just always goes back to, it's about truth, and it's about taking risks. It's about, you acknowledge, you have to find the truth to sort of succeed after you take the risk, but it's just about making bets and then succeeding in public. I think people talk about building in public all the time. That's not what's important. What's important is succeeding in public.
Yeah, by the way, Sahil, I don't think that's true.
Okay.
I know that's your perception of why you think you might have credibility, but I don't think that's true at all. I think
feel free to tell me why my tweets are better than I think.
No, your tweets stand on their own. They're good tweets. You have a lot, some of them are derivative of mine, so I forgive that. You did come after me on Twitter, so I grabbed all the good stuff early. Well, I mean, I came in early and I timestamped all the good stuff, so everyone else looks derivative, so fine. But yeah, so some of them are derivative, some of them are obvious, but you have some really good tweets. You have a lot of tweets that make me stop and think. And not a lot of people on Twitter do that. And there's a lot of wisdom in your tweets. It comes from your pain. I knew you when you were young and insufferable, right? You didn't have much interesting to say. You had a lot of technical things to say, but you didn't have much wisdom to you. It's only when Gumroad almost died and you suffered over it that you gained the wisdom, and then your tweets started getting really good because your internal thinking got really good. The Gumroad thing itself, I think that's just scar tissue that you have because Gumroad almost failed. So for you, you think it's important that Gumroad has to succeed for you to be taken credibly. Just like when Gumroad was failing, you thought that no one was taking you credibly. Neither of those were true. I think you were your own worst critic, which is fine. That's what it takes for a successful entrepreneur. A successful entrepreneur is their own worst critic. But you could stop tweeting the Gumroad financials tomorrow, and I don't think anybody would care. Your credibility is not derived from how Gumroad is doing. There are a lot of people who are incredibly successful financially who put out tweets that are complete garbage.